Assalamu alaikum friends, how are you all? Okay, so today we will continue to the third part of our PDF, which is an outline of the history of linguistics. So now let's start the third part of our video, which is modern linguistics. Modern linguistics emerged in the late 19th and early 20th century with the shift of focus from historical concerns of changes in languages over time to the idea that a template language can be viewed as a self-contained and structured system situated at a particular point in time. ओके सो मॉडर्न लिंग्विस्टिक्स हमारे पास लेट 19th सेंचुरी या फिर 20 सेंचुरी में स्टार्ट हुआ था एंड द मॉडर्न लिंग्विस्टिक्स देयर वाज अ शिफ्ट ऑफ फोकस फ्रॉम द हिस्टोरिकल कंसर्न्स लाइक हिस्ट्री से शिफ्ट हुआ फोकस टू द लैंग्वेज टू द आइडिया इस आइडिया की तरफ दैट लैंग्वेज कैन बी व्यूड एज अ सेल्फ कंटेंट एंड स्ट्रक्चर सिस्टम लाइक लैंग्वेज हमारे पास एक पूरा ही सिस्टम है लाइक इट्स अ सेपरेट सिस्टम एंड इट कैन बी स्टडीड एट अ पर्टिकुलर पॉइंट इन टाइम लाइक इस तरह नहीं है कि हम लोग लैंग्वेज की स्टडी करें बल्कि हम लोग लैंग्वेज को एट अ पर्टिकुलर टाइम भी स्टडी कर सकते हैं फॉर एग्जांपल वी कैन स्टडी द लैंग्वेज इन द 18th सेंचुरी ओनली लाइक हम लोग ये भी 18th सेंचुरी को ले सकते हैं और वी कैन टेक स्मॉल पीरियड ऑफ टाइम और मोर देन वन सेंचुरी सो इस तरह से हम लोग एक पर्टिकुलर पॉइंट पे लैंग्वेज को भी स्टडी कर सकते हैं This forms the basis of structural linguistics that developed in the post-First World War period. So, ये जो आइडिया आया है सेकंड के लैंग्वेज कैन बी अ सेल्फ कंटेन्ड एंड स्ट्रक्चर सिस्टम ये आइडिया हमारे पास स्ट्रक्चरलिस्ट लिंग्विस्टिक्स की बेसिस बना and it was the structuralist linguistics it was developed after the post first world war like world war के बाद हमारे पास structuralist linguistics आई so now the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure is widely acknowledged as a key figure in this focusing of interest and as the founding father of modern linguistics सो हमारे पास जो स्विस लिंग्विस्ट है फर्डिनेंड डी सशोर वो एक पाइवटल फिगर है या फिर मेन फिगर है इस मॉडर्न लिंग्विस्टिक में एंड ही इज आल्सो कंसिडर्ड एज फाउंडर ऑफ द मॉडर्न लिंग्विस्टिक्स Saussure began his career in the Indo-European historical comparative tradition within which he made a seminal contribution. Like उन्होंने वहाँ से अपना career start किया and Saussure published little himself but his student and after his death Geneva reconstructed his ideas from their lecture notes and published them posthumously in 1916 as Cours de Linguistique General, Course in General Linguistics. सशोर ने लाइक उसने कोई भी पब्लिकेशन नहीं की थी अपनी लाइफ में बट उनके जो स्टूडेंट थे उन्होंने फिर 1916 में उनके डेथ के बाद सशोर के डेथ के बाद उनके लेक्चर नोट्स को सही वर्क में चेंज किया एंड दे पब्लिश्ड इट इन द नेम ऑफ कोर्स इन जनरल लिंग्विस्टिक्स His work has proved a rich field for subsequent investigator and has inspired numerous interpretation and reinterpretation. So like it has inspired many of his students. जिन्होंने इनकी इंटरप्रिटेशन एंड री इंटरप्रिटेशन करके और भी वर्क किया है इनके आइडियाज पर सो हिज इन्फ्लुएंस एक्सटेंडेड बियॉन्ड लिंग्विस्टिक्स इनटू नेबरिंग डिसिप्लिन्स इंक्लूडिंग एंथ्रोपोलॉजी एंड सेमियोटिक्स सो उनकी जो उन्होंने लिंग्विस्टिक्स की बाउंड्रीज को भी एक्सपेंड किया है फॉर एग्जांपल और लाइक लैंग्वेज लिंग्विस्टिक्स की influence को भी study किया है on the field of anthropology and semiotics. So what basically is semiotics? Semiotics it is a field of study that investigates science and science systems generally. ये semiotics की definition है and Saussure championed the idea that language is a system of arbitrary signs and his conceptualization of the sign has been highly influential. Saussure ने क्या idea दिया था या फिर उनका जो concept था it was कि language is a system of arbitrary signs. Science उन्होंने ये concept दिया था and this concept it was highly influential later on. Phonetics and phonology were dominant in early modern linguistics. So जो हमारे पास modern linguistics आई तो in the very start phonetics and phonology they were on their peak. They were dominant subjects and topics at that time. The International Phonetic Association (IPA) was established in 1886 by a group of European phoneticians. So हमारे पास एक association बनाई गई in phonetic या फिर speech sound पे 1886 में and it was established by European phoneticians. The British phonetician Henry Sweet was one of the leading figures in phonetics in the second half of the 19th century. So Henry Sweet He is one of the main figure who has worked on phonetics. He and the Polish linguist D. Courtney were independently instrumental in development of the notion of the phoneme or distinctive sound. इस तरह हेनरी स्वीट के साथ साथ डी कॉर्टेनी ने भी phonetics पे बहुत काम किया है and foreshadowed centuries previously by the author of the first grammatical treatise like they both held work on the speech sound. Okay, so they worked on the first grammatical treatise, which was previously done by an unknown author. It was D. Courtney who drew the terminological distinction between phoneme and phone. And D. Courtney का एक और भी हमारे पास जो major work था, it was that he brought this terminological distinction or difference between phoneme and phone. British structuralism. So now we have just two major key figures in the Danish structuralism. One is Daniel Jones, and the second one he is Jair Firth. So now let's discuss Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones took up and extended Sweet's work on phonetics, as we previously studied that Sweet's work, like Sweet had worked on the phonetics. So now Daniel Jones he also extended the works of Sweet's on phonetics. His work was highly influential in the development of phonetics, and his books Outline of English Phonetics and English Pronouncing Dictionary were widely used throughout the world. So, जो Daniel Jones था, he has published two of his books which were highly influential in the development of phonetics are first one is Outline of English Phonetics and second one was English Pronouncing Dictionary. Now let's move on to J.R. Firth. What was his work in this British structuralism? But general linguistics in Britain really began with the work of J.R. Firth. So now like हमारे पास जो other sub field of linguistics है which is general linguistics. So it was started by J.R. Firth. उसने जो J.R. work था it led to the formation of general linguistics who held the first chair in linguistics in the University of London from 1944 to 1956. Firth, who had lived for some time in India and studied in its languages, brought a number of original and provocative perspectives to linguistics. The tradition he established is called the London School. Okay, so now we get to know about Firth that he like उन्होंने इंडिया में टाइम स्पेंड किया था and then he studied their languages like इंडिया की जो different languages थे उनको study किया and then he got some different perspectives to linguistics. Then he established a tradition which is known as the London School. So J.R. Fitt ने ये tradition start किया था London School का. Among other things, he questioned the assumption that speech segments of sound strung one after the other. और साथ में उन्होंने ये भी कहा था कि like जो हमारे पास speech है, they are formed from the segments of sounds. Like ये small segments of sounds मिलकर हमारे पास speech बनाते हैं and they are strung after one another. Regarding this as an artifact of alphabetic scripts, speech can be divided into small segments used by Westerners. Like he said कि हम लोग speech को small segments में divide कर सकते हैं. His theory of prosodic analysis focused on phonetics elements larger than individual sounds and anticipated some developments in phonology by half a century. And साथ में उन्होंने prosodic analysis पे भी focus किया था. Firth was also deeply concerned with the meaning and influenced by the Polish anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski. So Bronislaw Malinowski, Firth was influenced by him, and Bronislaw he has worked on the meaning of words. He developed a contextual theory of meaning. और Bronislaw Malinowski उन्होंने कहा था कि like he has given a theory of meaning that recorded a crucial role to use in context embodied in the aphorism meaning is used in context. Worked on firstly he said कि speech sound can be divided into smaller segments and secondly he has focused on prosodic analysis and thirdly he was influenced by Bronislaw Malinowski like because he has worked on the contextual meanings so he was influenced by him. Firth did not develop a fully articulated theory of grammar but rather laid out the framework on which a theory could be developed. उन्होंने कोई भी theory of grammar नहीं दी थी but still he has given the framework on which a theory can be developed. One of his students, Michael A.K. Halliday, was responsible for elaborating Firth's ideas and developing them into a coherent theory of language. And later on, उनके एक student थे जो कि जिनका नाम Halliday था, he was responsible like उन्होंने फिर एक theory दी थी, coherent theory of language दी थी. from the works of Firth, and from the late 1950s, Halliday refined a theory that ultimately came to be known as systematic functional grammar. So जो theory Michael Halliday ने दी थी, its name was systematic functional grammar, and Halliday's ideas have attracted a considerable amount of attention, especially in applied linguistics. और जो theory Michael Halliday ने दी थी, it was very useful in the applied linguistics, and the tradition he began is represented in Britain, Australia, America, Spain, China, and Japan. So Halliday की works को भी बहुत appreciate किया गया in different countries like Britain, Australia, America, Spain, China, and Japan. But Firth's ideas were developed in other ways as well, including by other students and their students. So Firth's के ideas पर not just Michael Halliday ने work किया था, but his many other students they have also worked on his ideas, and in fact, Firth's singular approach remains a source of inspiration to many and has spawned a range of new Firthian theories. So Firth's के जो उनका जो singular approach था, Firth's का जो singular approach था, it has been an inspiration for many, just like Ferdinand de Saussure, his ideas like उनके ideas ने भी बहुत से students को inspire किया था. Similarly goes for Firth, who has inspired many of his students, and from his approach, many non-Firthian theories have also been developed. Danish Structuralism. The Copenhagen school was headed by Louis Siemslev, who, along with Hans Oldel, developed an approach called glossomatics. जो कि कोपेनहेगन स्कूल था, उनके जो founders थे, their names were Louis Siemslev and Hans Oldel, and they both developed an approach known as glossomatics. So what is glossomatic and what it focused on? So glossomatics focused on the relations between units in a language system. Glossomatics units के बीच में जो relations था, उस पे focus करता था in accordance with Saussurean thought, which held that it is the relations between linguistic entities rather than the entities themselves that is significant. Saussure ने भी यही same thought दिया था या idea दिया था, which was कि जो linguistic entities है, इन दोनों के बीच में relationship is important rather than the entities themselves. So Yamslave published this theory in 1943. A decade later, a revised and annotated English translation appeared under the title of Prolegomena to a Theory of Language. So Yamslave he gave a theory, उन्होंने एक theory दी थी जिसको in 1943, and later on it was translated into English, like English language में इसको translate किया गया under the title of Prolegomena to a Theory of Language. So glossomatics is an algebraic theory of language. Glossomatics को हम कह सकते हैं कि it is like algebraic theory of a language, and it was far more abstract than any of its contemporary theories. So उस time में जितनी भी theories दी गई थी, this glossomatic theory it was more abstract than the other ones, and anticipated the algebraic orientation of American linguists of the post 1940s. A generation of Danish linguists were influenced by this theory in the 1930 to 1960 period. This went after Yamslev's death, and today there remains the little evidence of glossmatic thought in Danish linguistics. So ये जो theory थी glossomatics की, इसने एक generation of Danish linguists को influence किया था. Like from 1930 to 16 people, it influenced all the linguists. But after Yamslev's death, like जब Yamslev वो मर गया, so this influence was waned. Like ये influence खत्म हो गया after this. And there remains little evidence of glossomatic thought in Danish linguistics. The influence of the theory outside of Denmark was limited. Some Norwegian linguists adopted it for a while but quickly turned to American structuralism. Yamslev's thought did, however, influence other traditions, including systematic functional grammar and stratifictional grammar, and then semiotic theories in France were also influenced by glossomatics. So जिस तरह से हमने कहा है कि glossomatics ने पहले तो बहुत influence किया था एक generation को, but with the death of Yamslave, it this effect was like it ended. इसका जो influence था, it was only limited to the Denmark, and Norwegian जो linguists थे, they also adopted this theory of glossomatics. Like glossomatics को Norwegian ने भी adopt किया था, but later on they moved on to American linguistics. And then we get to know that के जो other theories like systematic functional grammar, which was given by Halliday, as we studied in the British structuralism, and then the stratifictional grammar, which was given by an American linguist, and then semiotic theories in France. They were all influenced by this Danish structuralism. Now let's move on to American structuralism. Okay, Franz Boas, Edward Sapir, and Leonard Bloomfield were responsible for setting American linguistics in its course. So, who started American linguistics? There were three persons who started it. Their name is Boas, Sapir, and Bloomfield. Bloomfield. Okay, so Boas' major concern was to gather information on the languages and cultures of Native Americans before they disappeared. So बॉस का जो मेजर वर्क था in this American structuralism, it is कि he gathered data on the languages, like उसने different languages पर data को gather किया, because he thought that before they vanish, so he collected all of the data of those languages, and the methods he and his students developed for the description of these languages became the basis of American structuralism. So जो American structuralism है, it all talks about the methodologies, like so boss उसने information को जमा किया, and then he and his student they developed methods for analyzing these information, and this led to the basis of American structuralism. Bose, along with his student Sapir, strongly upheld the notion that all languages should be described in their own terms rather than being forced into the mold of European languages. So Bose and उनके student Sapir, they both believe that कि जब हम किसी एक specific language को study कर रहे होते हैं, so we should not study it in the influence or under the mold of European languages. हम European languages को standard बनाकर इन languages को study नहीं कर सकते. For example, American languages को हम in the molds of European languages study नहीं कर सकते. So they maintained psychological and anthropological orientation, seeing language as intimately connected with the way of life and thought of its speaker. So इन्होंने एक connection दिया in between the life and thought. This notion was further developed by Sapir's student Benjamin Lee Wolff into what is now known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So उसके बाद Bose के बाद Sapir का जो student था, they both developed a hypothesis known as Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. The structure of the language one speaks determines how one views and perceives the world. So ये एक individual के बारे में हमें बताता है कि like how he is perceiving or viewing at the world. And Bloomfield's primary concern was to establish linguistics as a science. So the first two major figures like Bose and Sapir, they both collected data and they gave methodologies, and along with that they gave Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Now Bloomfield, or he wanted to make linguistics a discipline of science. He opposed the mentalistic orientation of Bose and Sapir and was heavily influenced by the mechanistic outlook of the fashionable behaviorist psychology. And then his approach was focused on methodology was the dominant force in American linguistics from the 1930s until the mid 1950s. So उसने भी mostly methodology पर focus किया, as he considered it as a science, and it was a dominant force in the American linguistics. Meaning played little part in this enterprise, and the analytical methods or discovery procedure that were developed attempted to exclude meaning as far as possible. So Joe Bloomfield he totally ignored the meaning, and he has worked on the analytical methods and discovery procedures. The focus on methodology and shunning of theory during these decades was perhaps at least partly a consequence of the orientation of American linguists to the description of the ट्रेडिशनल लैंग्वेजेस ऑफ द अमेरिकाज, क्योंकि उस टाइम पे जो अमेरिकन लिंग्विस्ट थे दे वांटेड टू डिस्क्राइब द अमेरिकन लैंग्वेजेस, जो डिफरेंट ट्रेडिशनल लैंग्वेजेस थे दे वांटेड टू डिस्क्राइब it. So for that purpose they started developing methodologies for studying different languages. Methods had to be developed in the first place to facilitate the gathering and analysis of information on the language. सो डिफरेंट मेथड्स को उन लाइक लैंग्वेज के बारे में इंफॉर्मेशन को गैदर करने के लिए एंड एनालिसिस ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन ऑन द लैंग्वेजेस, और फिर उस इंफॉर्मेशन को एनालाइज करने के लिए डिफरेंट मेथड्स की ज़रूरत थी विच वर नॉट स्पोकन बाय द लैंग्विस्ट, likewise to meet the demands of describing each language in its own terms. सो उसके बाद ये भी ज़रूरत पेश आई कि हर एक लैंग्वेज को उसके ओन टर्म्स, जस्ट लाइक वी सेड कि if we are analyzing American language, so we should analyze it in terms of that particular place or culture or that particular language. We should not study it in terms of the European languages. So it was essential to have bare analytical methods that presupposed as little as possible about the structure of language generally. And with that, the American structuralism come to an end. So thank you for watching. Allah Hafiz.